Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you to episode number 102 of the Primetime Rundown right here on the Eastern Observer. Our show is presented to you by Black Cats NYC alongside Mike Szabo. Joey Jarzynka on hand with you for yet another fantastic episode. Happy Thanksgiving Eve, everyone, and it has been such a long time since we have been with you here on the Eastern Observer. And Mike, good to see you, sir. It's been quite a while, and I believe it's been about a month, give or take. I think it was October 21st. I was in Philadelphia in my hotel room when we were doing episode 101. So it's, a lot of stuff has gone on since then. How are things on your side of, on the side of the island?
Yeah, doing really well. We're now, full into college basketball season. Things are going great. We got World Cup fever over here, this week starting up. So it's going really well right now. A lot of things happening in sports. Just really glad to have the show back once again. It's been a really cold, terrible 4 weeks.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt. And again, we apologize to all of our viewers because we really had hoped that we would get on for, I think, maybe a couple of weeks ago. We said it. I was dealing with COVID, so, it hit me hard. So we do apologize. I personally apologize. I had said to, I believe, on our Twitter account that we were going to go live on November, I believe it was 5th. Simply could not go. So I'm glad we're back here. We're all healthy. We're all set to go. Tonight's show, obviously, and pretty much every single show is presented to you by Black Cats NYC. Their newest hit solo, Nothing's Gonna Stop Us, is out now. And you can download that on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and pretty much every single Apple, or rather music store that you could find any music. So Spotify, iTunes, Apple Music. There we go. You see, I had to kind of modernize that, right? I said iTunes, right? Apple Music, iHeartRadio, all of the above can be found there. So their newest hit single, once again, ladies and gentlemen, is Nothing's Gonna Stop Us, Black Cats NYC. Mike, we've got a packed show tonight here on Thanksgiving Eve. And, we discussed before, obviously, how much we can get in here tonight. And boy, we can get a ton in. We've got a whole bunch of stuff in football. We've got a lot of hockey talk. We've got some college basketball talk, of course. And as you brought up, we've got the FIFA World Cup and, of course, some Major League Baseball news to talk about, too. And, of course, we will end our show with kudos and sports updates. So let's get things going right here in the NFL, Mike. And staying right here in New York, we got a chance to see the New York Jets lose the way the New York Giants did in 2010. And I know a lot of Giants fans definitely do not want to hear that, but Jets fans now get a taste of what the Giants felt back in 2010 against the Eagles, because the Patriots did it to them this past Sunday. What a brutal game for starters, because Zach Wilson, he threw a grand total 9 for 22. He completed 9 for 22. 22 attempts, 9 completions, 77 yards, not a single touchdown, not a single interception in a 10-3 loss. He was effectively benched, and now Mike White will be the starter. That was today's news. And then all of a sudden, we have begun to see some of the things beginning to trickle in about how if Zach Wilson when he was asked about the offense, if he let down the team's defense, and he said no. There's a lot to decipher there. There's a lot to break down, not only from the no, but also from the other things that have gone on in pretty much the press conference with Robert Saleh today, because what a disaster over in Florham Park, Mike. It's not a good look there for the Jets, and they're pretty good too. Their record, it speaks for itself.
Yeah, you kind of feel like all the events that transpired in the last couple days. This is a Jets team that's 2-win team on the season. Same old kind of thing. Absolutely into the lottery and whatnot. They're a pretty good team this year. It's what after Sunday's loss, it's like they're 6-4. Okay, it could be a lot better, but it's been a lot better than what it has been the last few years. So there is that. But I mean, just Sunday just felt like the air out of the Jets balloon, if you will, of how things are going this season has just completely bottomed out. Wilson hasn't been playing well in the games he's been there. And I mean, yeah, it's just boneheaded comments. That you don't need any media training for that. You don't need anything, just common sense. Like, in that situation, you let your defense down, you let your team down. I mean, how could you not? How could he sit up there and say, no, I didn't. No, our offense didn't let the team down. There were 9 punts in the game. Like you had nothing, 77 yards of offense, barely, under 100 yards of total offense. It was just absolute no-show. You scored 3 points, and the defense did expertly well to keep them in the game. It was 3-3 right up until the end. So the defense did its job. Where was the offense the entire game? Sure, you could say the same thing for the Patriots, but this comment from Zach Wilson and the Jets. I mean, it's all about accountability. Zach Wilson, all he had to say there was a simple answer. Yes, we needed to do better. Move on. This story never happens.
Well, he followed up with the quote that we saw through, later on in right after he said no, a few quotes later. He says, quote, yeah, it's super frustrating. It was a frustrating day. I feel like I had some balls that got away from me, but we got to find ways on offense. We got to do some digging, watch the film, and see what we can do better. But then we eventually hear about, Garrett Wilson, not too fond of it. He indirectly called out his quarterback. He indirectly called out the coaching staff. He indirectly said that, the wide receiver room needs a little bit more communication. The wide receivers need a little bit more communication as well. And simply they're not getting that. And now, I mean, it looks as if almost that through the first 11 weeks, they're clicking on most cylinders for the most part. They're about, clicking about 85%. And it's so crazy to see. And from the events that have transpired today, Mike, we have gotten to see how Zach Wilson apparently had an issue with Robert Saleh's benching of him. Connor Hughes of SNY said that Robert Saleh said in today's press conference that Zach Wilson's initial reaction was, now get this, folks, quote, why now? Why me? I want to play upon being benched. Now, we know about the stories from Zach Wilson over the summer. We know about the things that have gone on with him, not only as, a reality star outside of MetLife Stadium, but now we're seeing the reality star on the football field that now could potentially be fumigating this locker room. And it's not a good thing, because when you say to yourself, well, this team is on the upward trajectory, how do you look and say to yourself that this is your franchise quarterback that you drafted high? And not only that too, Mike, your legitimate reaction is, why now? Why me? I want to play? What do you mean, why me? The quarterback always gets the first blank end of the stick.
Yeah.
If the offense is not performing, who is the one that's throwing the ball? It's not the wide receiver. It's not the running back. It's not the offensive lineman. It's the quarterback. It is a legitimate disgrace, Mike, to see what Zach Wilson had to say. And then it got better. And then it even got better too. Rich Cimini posted a tweet a few moments ago. Zach Wilson calls this a humbling experience. Now, this is after Robert Saleh's press conference. This was a few minutes ago that Zach Wilson got a chance to talk. Regrets his comments from after the game. Says he did not realize what he said until his dad texted him. Says he feels awful and wanted to apologize to teammates. Where does the accountability come in? Well, before I throw this to you, Mike. Now, again, I'm not trying to make this a therapy session, but I have not really had a great relationship with my father. But even if I did, you're in the National Football League. You're in the world's biggest media market. you are in one of the top media markets in the world, that the New York Jets get scrutinized for every little thing that they do because they are simply the Jets. And you realize this when your father texted you? Go on, Mike.
Yeah, I mean that is just that little nugget of information. I don't know how Samini would have found that out. If I was Zach Wilson, I would never, ever in my wildest dreams admit something like that. I'll never admit that I found this out, that I found out I did something wrong. I said something wrong because I had a text conversation with my father about it, and talking about the game. Hey Zach, maybe you shouldn't have said that. Well, I think him being what, like 20, 22 years old, whatnot, by now, I think he kind of should have realized after the initial press conference on Sunday that you realized you did something wrong, pack something up with the locker room. Yeah, I mean, even if you were lying, you could have just said, "Oh yeah, I realized I did something wrong after the press conference. A couple guys talked to me about it. We talked in the locker room, I don't know, smoothing things out." Something like that. I would never admit that that's how you figure out you did something wrong. Just the clear lack of accountability. Like you said, quarterback is it's so essential to everything about the success of your team in football. The buck stops with you, and he just showed that he can't be the guy to really take the blame and take the weight of a franchise on his shoulders. He hasn't played well this year. Then this stuff comes out, and now Salah's not, effectively benched him. Not even benched him as the backup. He said, "Don't even bother coming to the game on Sunday." So I mean, this is going down in a hurry for the Jets, and like we said in our chat today, again, same old Jets kind of thing. This is a quarterback that was picked second overall, and you're very even if he didn't make these comments, you're very well envisioning a possibility where they go out and try and find another quarterback in the offseason.
I find it remarkable that not only did he actually spew that information out, granted, you are 22 years old, right? Now, the thing to me, right, is that if you're 20 to 22 years old, right now, we know he's 23, August 3rd, 1999, right? Which, God, we are old. Or rather, I am old because, Mike, you're only a year younger. So you're still a baby. But be that as it may, and all the jokes aside, for those that don't know about Zach Wilson, his uncle is the CEO of JetBlue, right? Now, we don't try and get political or anything like that here, but the thing to me, though, is that if you have money, right, and you don't know, especially with the stuff that happened in the summer, right, and the spring, we won't elaborate there, but the moment that happened, that's a big red flag for the Jets, right? But then we move forward and say, there might be some issues there with whatever, right? And the reason why I brought up the JetBlue part and the uncle with the money and stuff like that is because you have a certain attitude and a certain aura that you give off, right? Now, that aura that you give off is a I don't really care type mentality, right? Now, you work for everything that you've got, right? Quarterback, blue collar, whatever the case may be. This attitude that Zach Wilson exuded to everybody shows to me that this man does not give a rat's you-know-what. Mm-hmm. Because what is it, Mike, that a lot of people always say, right? Your initial reaction or your initial sentence is typically the truth. You could come back and say, "Oh, I missaid it. It's a joke." Sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes your initial brain reaction that you then spew and eventually leaves your mouth is what you really mean. Do you agree with that? And the reason why also, like I said, I'll go back to what I was saying in terms of the rich part or whatever the case is that there's a different aura about you and how you are brought up. And the reason why is because I grew up in a very rich area where I'm not really friends with those people anymore, right? Because they think that they're better than you, right? They think that they're better than you because money makes the world go round. It's not the case. You're a National Football League quarterback, and you have to be as humble as you can. That, to me, it boggles my mind. And that's why, grinding my gears, seriously, there are many people out there that kill to be in Zach Wilson's spot. And his answer is no when he let the team's when asked if he let the team's defense down. Final thought, Mike.
I don't think he doesn't care. He clearly has a passion for the game. Clearly, when his response to Saleh was, even if it was irrational, him saying I want to play and all that sort of stuff, that's fine. He clearly shows that he cares and has some passion. But the problem is it's directed in the wrong way, where I mean, he just doesn't put any blame on himself.
No accountability.
Yeah, the blame is just everywhere but where the source that it should be, and that's him. First and foremost, you have to accept, he's been bad. His QBR this season is the lowest of any quarterbacks in the NFL. He's legitimately been, by the numbers, been the worst quarterback in the NFL, and this was the number 2 pick just a couple of years ago by the Jets. So he showed a complete lack of accountability. And if you're in his perspective, anybody in his circle, you're going to have to take this time as a learning experience, as a lesson, and work your way back into the squad and earn back the locker room. And for Saleh's perspective, kind of feel like he had to do this because you heard the comments, you mentioned the comments from Garrett Wilson and whatnot. If you start seeing a schism in the locker room happening, that has to be stamped out quickly. You'd rather move on to somebody else, see, even if, whether it's in the short term with Mike White, Joe Flacco, whatever, piece it together the rest of the way, or someone else next year for the long term. But he's at a really concerning point, Zach Wilson, for his future. Things like this cost you your NFL career really quickly sometimes. And, you just hope for his sake he takes this as a bit of a learning experience and changes his mindset to take some accountability if he wants to be a quarterback in the National Football League.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you brought up how he has been statistically the worst quarterback. 35th in total QBR, 37.6. 35th in passing yards per game, 180 yards per game. Last in yards per dropback, 5.1 yards. Last in pass touchdowns per attempt, 2.3%. 2.3%. You look at some of these guys that are, 10, 15, higher than that, 2.3. Good Lord. There's nothing there. There's literally nothing there.
Some of the throws he was missing on Sunday, I mean, any quarterback, I don't care if the worst person ever, their backup or whatnot, they're making those throws easily for easy completions. Some of the check downs he was missing, it's like, good Lord, where you could have bad days at the office, but I mean that was just horrible. Some of the throws he was missing. The worst part about it is the Jets have a really solid roster around him. You look at each individual component, yeah, maybe it doesn't fly off the page, but as a unit, on whether it's the wide receiver groups, the running backs, the defense and whatnot, they have a solid roster. Then you just have Wilson, who just outlaid the numbers, how bad he's been. If you want to start continuing to move this team on an upward trajectory, he's got to improve really fast.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I'm pumped to see what goes on with the Jets because they're going to be playing the lowly Chicago Bears. And as of right now, Jets are favored. So we'll see how long that lasts. We'll see if eventually that line goes down to potentially even. I don't know. There's a lot of talk also on the Chicago side too that potentially Justin Fields may not be the answer. There was a little bit of some talk there from Trent Dilfer. I don't know, Mike, if you saw that with Trevor Siemian, if he were to potentially go in to replace to replace Justin Fields. there was some chatter there that he basically said that he would get his brain splattered or destroyed or something along those lines. I got to find the direct quote there with it. Let's see. And I think it's not only the poor play from Justin Fields, because that's not the case. There is a left shoulder injury that Justin Fields has, and it's being described as a left shoulder injury as a separated shoulder with torn ligaments. So for those that do not know, it's an HC joint injury. So it's a dislocation that can cause torn ligaments, and that is going to be in his left shoulder. So it's not his throwing shoulder, but would most likely I would say affect his play. There's no doubt about it. I'm trying to find this quote here because this is a fantastic quote.
Although it seems like they've been playing better in the last couple weeks in terms of their offense. They've been scoring a little bit more and whatnot. So I mean, yeah, the Bears are still the Bears in terms of their record and how the results have generally gone. But honestly, the last couple of weeks you've seen Fields until he's picked up this injury. You've kind of started to like what you've seen. You've scored a little bit more. The offense looks slightly better. And I'm not saying he's the answer all of a sudden, but there was starting to be some flashes these last couple weeks.
Yeah. So I found the quote here. So on AM 670, the Scores Parkinson's and Spiegel show over in Chicago, he says, they ask him, they say, so, what do they think about Trevor Siemian? And Trent Dilfer says, and I quote, "He'll get destroyed. He'll get his brains beat in." I mean, tell us really what you think about Trevor Siemian going up against the Jets, or even potentially going in that offense for Matt Eberflus. Again, this is a Justin. This everything is built around him. Trevor Siemian, we know him from his days in Denver when he was a backup in New Orleans. Simply couldn't get it done. I don't see anything here. I think that if he were to play, the Jets, Mike White, Mike Szabo, Joey Jarzynka would probably have a much better day than what Zach Wilson had last week against the Chicago team. If Siemian were to go, they don't really have anything. And on top of it too, their defense, they traded away Roquan Smith, they traded away Robert Quinn. There's really not much there. So all Jets all the way. But I'm pumped to see what goes on in Florham Park. Lots to break down throughout the rest of the regular season in the NFL. Mike, let's go on to Week 11 recap. A lot of good games, but there are some issues there with a lot of teams, though. And we got a chance to obviously talk about the Jets being one, but there are many others. And I'll start with another one here. Arizona is not good at all. I think that's the bottom line here. Arizona is a legitimate disaster. Cliff Kingsbury should be fired immediately. Where's our good friend Kyle Madsen? We need to have him on the moment that Cliff Kingsbury gets the axe, because I think we need to have a primetime or maybe just an instant reaction, like a whole party for that.
Bring the champagne. Act like you just won the Super Bowl.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt, because now we've gotten to see some. We got a chance to see some rumors going around that there is a slight possibility that Sean Payton has his eyes on Los Angeles Chargers and the Arizona Cardinals coaching positions if they were to open. And oddly enough,
then
Right.
then you maybe wouldn't want to throw champagne if Cliff Kingsbury gets fired, if that's what's going to happen, because that's a pretty nice trade.
Yeah, I was going to say, and I'm sure a lot of Arizona Cardinals fans would be ecstatic if they were to get Sean Payton. But then again, he's still under contract with the Saints. So there would have to be some movement there in terms of a potential trade, like a John Gruden type thing from many, many years ago. Could it happen? Don't know. But now I guess that brings me to my next point is that how long is Brandon Staley's leash with the Los Angeles Chargers? Because granted, the injuries are there, Mike, but this is a team with high expectations. The Spanos family, they moved out of San Diego. They moved out of Qualcomm Stadium, and to build this, to join in with the Kroenke family to bring the Chargers up north to LA, which has been a legitimate disaster from day one, which we all knew was going to happen anyway. Your fan base is down in San Diego, but whatever you wanted, you wanted the bright lights of LA, no problem, and you're simply getting all of the road teams fans coming in to play. Simply a disaster there. So how long is his leash? The Vikings, they got blown out 40-3 at home against Dallas. Is that a sign of bad things to come? And my last one is Washington. Are they here to stay for the short term with Taylor Heineke? Mike, your recap from week 11. Any concerns, any things, that you look back to and say, eye-popping things for you?
A lot of the points you mentioned were pretty good.
Yeah.
I thought, honestly, the Bills game, I thought that was going to be a little bit closer with how much adversity the Bills had to deal with escaping the tundra last week.
Oh, yeah.
Um, so I thought I thought that the Browns were going to put up a little bit more of a fight there. I mean, I feel like we say this every week, but I mean, good God, the Denver Broncos just need to and you're not going to get rid of Russell Wilson, obviously, but geez, everywhere else needs to be torn down. I mean, I I don't know what has gone on there. How could they be that bad? The division overall, the AFC. We'll take this time out to say the AFC West has been absolutely terrible this year. When I mean, rightfully so. When you looked at all the teams on paper, we hyped up this division that it was going to be so good this
Yep.
year. All four teams could make the playoffs and whatnot. You have good quarterback play all over the place. Good teams. Devontae Adams had joined the Raiders as well. Russell Wilson and the Broncos. The Broncos were booked on so many primetime games, and they just looked absolutely terrible. And that game with the Raiders, I mean, it was just a battle of who's worse offensively, and the Raiders just barely came out on top with that. My other thing was the Baltimore Ravens. I mean,
Mhm.
I think it's not being talked enough. There's no injury, kind of major injury concerns here. Lamar's not injured or anything like that. They have just not been good this year, not been convincing at all. 13-3 over the lowly Panthers. Certainly my fantasy team, I'm not really happy with Lamar Jackson right now. Um, it's just kind of really puzzling what's going on over there in Baltimore. Sure, they're 7-3, but I don't think it's a really happy 7-3.
No, and on top of it too, Rashad Bateman is out for the year too. Deshaun Jackson has pretty much only seen, I think, 1 or 2 snaps. The emergence of Demarcus Robinson, Mark Andrews is a big question mark right now. He's looked pretty good for the most part, but there are some injury concerns there. Devin Duvernay, they simply cannot get a lot of consistency out of the wide receivers. Now, we have not really seen consistency out of Baltimore wide receivers since truly Anquan Bolden. It has been such a long time, who, mind you, to again make viewers feel old that are not named Mike Szabo, Anquan Bolden is on the semifinalist list for the Hall of Fame this upcoming season. But going back to our initial point, though, Baltimore, they definitely have some issues, but they have shored up their linebacking core, which has been nice for them anyway, because since losing Matthew Judon in free agency, they have missed a solid linebacker. They do have a few, but now they were able to shore it up even more with Roquan Smith, which is a nice thing for them. And as we know, what Baltimore's identity is, especially on defense, runs through the linebacking core. And we have known that forever with Ray Lewis, Terrell Suggs. The list goes on. And when Matthew Judon was there as well, it was simply just that's what they harp on, is that defensive line and that 3-4 or 4-3 scheme that that has been played for so many years down there. Going back to the last point, though, just because we are so close to, Washington, and, with me being an Eagles fan and Mike being a Giants fan, I think it gets a little scary with Washington, because now this division, and we have not said this since Mike was probably in a carriage, the NFC East might just be the best division in football. I don't think it might be. I think it is the best division in football.
Yeah, and it was really meme worthy last year for how bad it was, and I guess the old not old, but the GIF of Michael Jordan and the Last Dance, and he took that personally kind of thing is. I guess everybody in the NFC East kind of saw the memes last year from how bad they were, how bad the division was, and my God, all the teams have responded this year, and it's such a good division top down. I mean, Washington's always such an interesting case where how they kind of tried to put it together, where the last couple of years we always think, all right, Terry McLaurin's a good wide receiver to build around. They got solid running backs to have a solid running unit. Antonio Gibson, beforehand, way back when, it seemed like it was J.D. McKissick, and then now there's Brian Robinson in there. They have a good defense that just got Chase Young back.
Yeah,
they've always had for the last couple of years, like, quarterback's been a black hole, but somehow things kind of roll with Taylor Heinicke. Like, he's not the greatest quarterback out there. You probably look at all the metrics, he's probably going to be like number 20 of all your, if you rank all the quarterbacks or something like that. It's not going to be pretty, but somehow they just seem to be much more of a threat with him behind center, and something about it just seems to click when Heinicke's running the offense, and they've taken down Green Bay. They've won a game that, I would say you should win, but you expect the way things were going before Heinicke came in, that it would be a much more, battle of the lowly teams, kind of lottery teams kind of thing between them and Houston this weekend. But yeah, they just look like much more of a threat with Heinicke there, and they might be a team. They might play spoiler to, God forbid, if anybody's going to try and take down the Eagles at the top of the division, pull them back down,
and they did already. They already took them down
there. Yeah,
they took them down last Monday. And that's a big thing too. They can play spoiler. They did. They took down the Eagles to get them, to stunt their perfect record continuing. They were going for 9-0. They simply could not get that done. And they are now they're 9-1, but they were 8-1 at the time. So that's definitely something there with Washington that a lot of the NFC East faithful are going to have to keep an eye out for. Mike, let's keep on moving forward here, and let's go into week 12. So it is Thanksgiving tomorrow, and there is 3 games on the slate tomorrow. There's Buffalo and Detroit. There's the Giants and Dallas, which I believe is the marquee game, of course. But there is one that is an underdog here. And the reason why I say underdog is because not many people are talking about New England and Minnesota. And that game, record-wise and statistics-wise, is pretty good, because Minnesota is, if I'm not mistaken, they're 8-1. Not only are they, or rather 8-2, rather, they're 8-2 after that 40-3 loss with Dallas, but they also are going up against the New England team that has a little bit of life now after taking down the Jets in Miracle of the Meadowlands type fashion. They are now 6-4. So we know also how Kirk Cousins is in primetime, but we also know how the Detroit Lions have been historically on Thanksgiving, and it's not good. But we'll start off with Buffalo and Detroit because Buffalo, Mike, has some experience already playing in Detroit less than 7 days ago. You brought it up. So much adversity. They were told they had to get their butts over to Detroit somehow. They didn't drive. They couldn't drive, obviously. They flew. They got there. Cleveland got there as well. Buffalo took them down. What do you see in this one here? For me, I mean, I think Buffalo's got the upper hand because not only Detroit, they were on the road, but Buffalo already played on that field.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think Buffalo's going to wind up winning this game. You think just the offense, Detroit's totally overmatched with the Buffalo's offense. I know their defense sort of looked better, the last few weeks, and certainly against the Giants this week. But make of that what you will with the Giants wide receiver core. The Lions this time are going up against Stephon Diggs rather than I don't know Wan'Dale Robinson before he went down in the game there, or I can't even remember which wide receivers we're throwing out anymore because we're getting far down the depth chart. Isaiah Hodgins is out there.
We'll get to the Giants in a moment. Yeah, you're 100% right.
Yeah, they're going to be dealing with much higher octane wide receiver group, and I think Buffalo rolls in this one.
Yeah, and not only that, too, something that I also want to bring up, too, is that I believe that Buffalo will roll in this one, but I do not believe that Detroit will go down without swinging because this Buffalo team, granted, they are second in total offense. Detroit, though, has won 3 straight games, and they are 8th in total offense. Let's keep that in mind. Granted, their defense is absolute Swiss cheese, but the difference, though, is that Jamal Williams, 12 rushing touchdowns, but Buffalo's defense, and more specifically their secondary, has been very, very iffy.
Yeah.
They have Jordan Poyer back. They lost Micah Hyde long time ago to injury. Tre'Davious White is working his way back, and it's very inconsistent. I personally think that we might see a small shootout. Yeah, I believe that we are going. Go ahead.
Yeah, Detroit's been involved in a couple of shootouts we've seen. Even if they've been on the losing side this year, we know they can score. You mentioned the Jamal Williams too. He's really coming to his own as a running back this year. Whether it was due in part to injury and as well as Williams's play, he's really taken that 3 down back, that starting back role away from DeAndre Swift. He has 12 rushing touchdowns. I know they were showing the graphic during the game, through this stage of the season, more than Barry Sanders had in 91. So he's had a really good year. Detroit can score the ball. I wouldn't put it. I think you're right. I wouldn't put it past them to get involved into a little bit of a shootout here.
Not only that, too, again, Amon-Ra St. Brown is definitely in need of a solid game. Jameson Williams, also keep in mind, too, we remember him from his days at Alabama. His 21-day activation window has opened. So they will be getting some reinforcements. They have won 3 straight. They are 4-6. And you look at the spread. Buffalo is favored by 9.5 points. Now, this is one where I might pound Detroit. Now, I may be called an absolute psycho by thinking that. You're playing in Detroit's house. Granted, you already played on their field. But I am very intrigued to see how Jared Goff continues to improve under this Dan Campbell-led offense. Granted, the defense can't stop anybody, but the offense can do a number on you, and we've seen it with Jamal Williams, DeAndre Swift at times, Josh Reynolds, Amon-Ra St. Brown. The list goes on, and that offensive line is beginning to get healthy, And they're beginning to really look like a formidable offense. Do not put Detroit in the back burner just yet. And granted, Buffalo did get, I still think Buffalo will win. They do have the upper hand because how many visiting teams, not named the Jets and the Giants, can say, well, we played on the field already the week before, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jets, Giants, now Chargers, Rams can say, well, okay, we're playing the Chargers one day, the Rams the next week. We're playing on the same field, right? Same thing with the Jets and the Giants. And again, how many times does this happen with one team occupying one building? I don't know if it's ever happened, to be quite honest with you. And also, too, keep in mind, Dawson Knox going up against a porous secondary. I believe that Buffalo will have a day, but Jared Goff is going to have a day as well. It's going to be a fantastic opening game. Mike, your prediction, what do you got?
I'll go Buffalo. I'll say 40-35.
Ooh, you've got a legitimate shootout. Okay. I am going to go Buffalo 35 and Detroit 28. I'm going to go a little bit lower there on the scale, but I would say 35-28, and I think it's going to be a fantastic opening game on Thanksgiving afternoon. So the marquee game that everyone keeps talking about, of course, Giants and Cowboys. Dallas is favored by 10. Yep. Now, for those that don't know about the Giants' injury woes, Dallas also has their fair share of injuries as well. And it's not so much on the injury front. It's more of the illness bug that has been sweeping through Dallas's locker room that has already taken out a whole bunch of guys and has put in guys in the doubtful marker. So, Mike, let's tell our viewers here the injury report for Dallas that just came out today, which is their final one. Anthony Barr, linebacker, is out with a hamstring. Defensive end Terrell Basham, illness, doubtful. Defensive end Dante Fowler, illness, questionable. Defensive tackle Jonathan Hankins, illness, doubtful. So those two right there, and Basham and Hankins, who are doubtful, those are two key cogs on the defensive line, with Fowler most likely going to play, but not being 100%. Now you move into the secondary, Kelvin Joseph with an illness, questionable. DeMarcus Lawrence with an illness, questionable. That's your entire that's your entire defensive line. And then Neville Gallimore, illness, questionable. And then go back into your secondary, Donovan Wilson, questionable with an illness. What a disaster there in Big D.
Yeah, I mean, the illness bug, I mean, it's, it happens all the time with the NFL. You're working through injuries and whatnot week to week. But I mean, geez, that's a grocery list there that they got to work through. I mean, who knows? Will we find out any more before kickoff tomorrow? I think Micah Parsons there was some sort of, I don't think it was illness. I heard there was something about him in the last couple of days too, or I guess he got over that injury or illness or something like that. But yeah, that's concerning for Dallas. And this is quite the hefty game in terms of the standings. 2-7-3 teams. Dallas kind of already has the head-to-head. They had the win in MetLife a number of weeks ago on Monday Night Football.
Yep.
So trying to do the sweep. Giants trying to get back at them, take revenge for earlier on in the season, and gain an edge in the standings after last week's bad loss to the Lions. But yeah, the Giants injury woes on the other side been well documented this year. They've been down to the bare bones on offense. This week it's going to be the offensive line where that's absolutely decimated. It always seems like they're losing a guy every game. But yeah, so it's going to be interesting for both teams who really steps up in this game and makes the necessary plays in order to win.
Mike, this is the epitome of next man up mentality.
Yeah.
When you have 2, 4, 6, 8 guys for Dallas on your injury list, and then for the Giants, you have 2, 4, 6, 8 guys on the injury list. That's a combined 16 players. And these are not players that are second and third on your depth chart. A lot of these guys here for both teams are first on your depth chart that are not going to play.
Yeah.
Now for Dallas, you've got Daniel Bellinger. Or, I'm sorry, for the Giants, Daniel Bellinger, who's out with an eye injury. Offensive lineman Josh Azudu out with a neck injury. Offensive lineman John Feliciano out with a neck injury. Shane Lemieux out with a toe. Evan Neal, who is out with a knee injury and also the illness bug. It looks like it might have crept into the locker room for the Giants too. Andrew Thomas also is questionable with that illness too. I think the big loss, though, here going up against this Dallas team is both Adoree Jackson, who we already knew with a knee injury. He'll be out 4 to 6 weeks, but I think the even bigger loss here is Fabian Morrow, who's out with an oblique injury, already ruled out. And now you'll be going very, very deep into that depth chart and going up against a couple of guys, really a trio of guys: Noah Brown, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup. Those three. And Noah Brown, obviously, we know is a main special teamer, but he has really come into his own this year. Going up against pretty much 3 guys that are not listed on the injury report. And you've got Dak Prescott back. You're playing in Dallas. But there's a lot of hope, though, for the Giants, because you could say to yourself, well, when you look at that injury list and say, well, that defensive line is really struggling, and if Micah Parsons potentially is not playing, or if there's something wrong with him, maybe not at 100%, maybe we might be able to just feed the ball to Saquon Barkley and say, here, take it, just take it up, run it up the gut as many times as possible. But is that enough against this Dallas team, Mike?
I don't know. That's tough to say, because you really saw last week in the game against the Lions sort of the formula to slow down the Giants this season. And not like the Giants have been any sort of offensive juggernaut. We've seen how close the games have been all the way and whatnot. They're really not scoring, much more than 20, 25 points a game, if that. Depending on the week that we look at the score on.
And they average 21 points per game, the Giants, yeah.
Yep. So, I mean, last week it was kind of they really slowed down Saquon, forced the Giants to really become a pass-first offense, and we saw how much they struggled with that. Daniel Jones had about as many picks as he's had in all of 2022. So just when he's been, I wind up getting into it with a couple of Giants group chats that I have. I think last week kind of was a big red flag about like the skill and the future of Jones on this team, because the success of the team and why the Giants have shockingly got out to the 7-3 record is because of Jones throwing less. Now it helps when you have Saquon Barkley back. He's such a great weapon. He's been healthier. You want to utilize that. And clearly, whether it's because of personnel or just the philosophy of the offense through Brian Dable and Mike Kafka, the Giants have been built on the run this year. But I think it's also been a part of trying to figure out what they have with Jones as well. You look at the other years, Jones has not thrown. He's thrown a lot less this year, about I think like 10 to 15 less pass attempts per game than some of the other years that he's been in the NFL. And now this was a day where the game called for him to throw more. It looked much shakier. I mean, yeah, you could pick apart each interception. Well, this, maybe it wasn't really his fault and this and that. I don't care. 2 interceptions, it's still on there. It didn't look great. The throws weren't that great. He looked a lot more shakier. So you really think long term, yes, the wide receiver group, you're down to the bare bones, picking guys off of the practice squad and waiver wires. But you're kind of thinking for the Giants, that game was like, oh my God, the more times Daniel Jones throws, is he more of a liability? So that I think was a little bit of a red flag, long term, that Lions game. And I think that's Detroit's defense kind of showed a formula. Slow down Saquon, slow down the Giants being able to run, make them a pass-first offense. And with the wide receiver group that they have, they're going to run into some trouble.
Well, that definitely could be something. But of course, our co-host, who's on extended leave, Ian Schraier, is joining us via Facebook, taking a peek at us. Thank you for tuning in, and say hello to LP for us when you do go out on Thanksgiving Eve. Ian says, well, with what wide receivers currently on that team can Jones succeed with? Well, that brings up a solid point, because you only have, if I'm not mistaken, 2 to 3 healthy wide receivers that are names, and one of which is questionable also this week in Richie James. You also have Darius Slayton, too. Kenny Golladay is pretty much nowhere to be found. So really, out of those 3, you have 2 solid guys that you can count on. And if those 2 guys are shut down by the Dallas secondary, who do you have to throw to? How can you succeed with that? Exactly what Ian says. And sure, I definitely agree with Ian there. How can you succeed with what you are being presented with? It puts you in a little bit of a predicament, though, again, especially against a depleted Dallas team. If the formula of run for, I don't know if you want to call it run first, but I guess you might be able to call that with Saquon. If that doesn't work, well, then what happens?
Yeah, I just don't know how well it's going to work. You see all the injuries on the offensive line. Are they really going to be able to give Saquon the opportunities and to generate a good run game tomorrow? I don't know. Basically the entire offensive line is either out or questionable, and Andrew Thomas is the biggest one there, being questionable. If he can't go, he's been quietly solid this season at left tackle, and I just don't know how they're going to be able to establish the run with that much uncertainty on the offensive line. So I don't know where you go there if it's involving Saquon in the passing game much more. I don't know how they put it together. Give credit. I have faith in this coaching staff that they'll find a plan, but to try and stay in the game and find a formula to potentially win. But I don't know. My main thing is that the Cowboys put up a number of points on this team in MetLife with Cooper Rush. I don't know you got Dak Prescott in there now. I think it's really gonna be tough to overcome.
September 26th, 2022, Monday Night Football. Dallas won 23-16 against the Giants. Now, you look at passing yards allowed for the Giants, 211.8 is what they average. Dallas averages 175 yards that they give up passing-wise. Now, that makes it even scarier also, because that is one of the middle ground in terms of rankings in the league for passing yards given up. Now, for the Giants, it's a little bit on the lower portion in the 20s. But now, without your top two guys in the secondary, with the Dory Jackson and Fabian Morrow out, puts a lot of pressure on Xavier McKinney, puts a lot of pressure on the young guys. Going back to Ian's couple of follow-ups here. The Giants scored how many against one of the most porous defenses in football last week? Not sure it matters much in Dallas, where it's recently been a horror show for the Giants. Granted, this is true. And we also brought up about how bad that defense is for the Lions. We brought that up in our last segment too. Ian then follows up with that by saying, quote, having Dayball has and will continue to make a significant difference for this team, but I'm not so sure the game is all that close tomorrow. Okay. With a 10-point spread, Dallas is favored by 10. Mike, let's get your prediction here. Bias aside, Dallas or the Giants?
Cowboys win 30-10.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
I was not expecting that.
Yeah.
27-17 Cowboys win. That's where I truly believe that, again, when you look at this defensive front for Dallas, they're hurting. If Andrew and again, I'm personally banking on Andrew Thomas playing. And again, will he be the difference maker? I don't know. But I also believe that with what we are hearing with this illness bug that's going around now, where the coaching staff has forced some players to wear masks again because there's so much going around in that room. How do we know that they are going to be 100%? That to me is key. And again, Dallas, yes, it has been a house of horrors for the Giants, but this is a different Giants team that has a different coach, has shown the mentality that these guys can be that next man up and prosper. I believe that it's not going to be. I think that the Giants cover. 27-17 they lose though, but they still cover. Ian agrees with us. You guys are probably right on point with those predictions. It's pretty much the same. It's just an extra touchdown each, or an extra touchdown for the Giants that I have there. Let's move to the next one. The last game of Thanksgiving. New England and Minnesota. This one is quietly the best game, in my opinion. 6-4, 8-2. Patriots are 6-4. Minnesota's 8-2. This is a fantastic contest for New England. Why? First off, they are underdog 2.5 points, but they're facing a Minnesota team that's in prime time. And we know how well Kirk Cousins plays in prime time. We know how well he plays on Monday night, but we know overall on prime time, he's a legitimate disaster. Minnesota did just beat Dallas in their house 40-3 last week on that 4:25 time slot. New England is 4th in teams defense. I don't believe that this will be an easy go for Minnesota tomorrow. And I believe that this is going to be a lot closer than a lot of people think. I wouldn't be surprised if this is like a 1-point game at the end of the night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think people kind of look at that Jets Patriots game and way too easily write them off as like, oh yeah, Minnesota's gonna steamroll them. Good old Bill always finds a way with his team, and they're always in there somehow. You definitely know they're going to have some sort of plan to limit Justin Jefferson. Again, the primetime factor, as much as people want to shake that off, it is a factor with Kirk Cousins historically. I think it's another game where, again, Minnesota, even though they had that big win on the road over Buffalo, this is sort of kind of the big statement. They got absolutely punched in the mouth by Dallas in a way I don't think we all expected. 40-3 at home. Even if you lost that game, okay, but 40-3,
they didn't show up.
They did not show up at all. They got punched in the mouth. This game could be arguably just as strong of a statement as the Buffalo game was. How they respond from that kind of loss if they want to truly beat the contenders and the kings of the NFC this year. So I think they'll overcome, but I think it's going to be quite a close game. The only reason why I think even with how competitive the Patriots defense keeps this team and whatnot, I mean, good God, the offense is just Mac Jones. It's not working. It's not running well. I mean, granted, they found an absolute gem in developing Ramondre Stevenson this year, and they got a pretty solid rushing attack with him. But I mean, there's just not much there with Mac Jones and trying to produce any solid play from him and that wide receiver core. It was an atrocious game offensively. Granted, the Giants, we talked about the Jets defense beforehand, but it's going to be a close game. But I still think Minnesota wins out because I just don't think the Patriots have the kind of offense necessary to win a game like this on the road.
I believe that it's going to be a fairly close game, and the reason why is because New England's defense is for real. Their defense is for real, but it's all a matter of what can be done with Justin Jefferson. And you also look, because really Adam Thielen, we haven't heard so much about this year. He's still quiet. He's looking for that breakout game this year. But also you look at TJ Hawkinson too, and you look and see what has gone on safety-wise and covering the tight end, and New England has done a fairly good job with that this year. So if you're able to take out Hawkinson from the game, then who do you turn to? You turn to Justin Jefferson. Well, what if you take him out then? Well, then you might have to go to Adam Thielen then. You might have to, you might have to figure a few things out on the offensive side, or do you just feed Dalvin Cook the whole way and Alex Madison? Do you do that? Can you do that? But then on the other side, though, you say to yourself, well, that offense, it might not be so great for the Patriots. Ramondre Stevenson, Jacoby Myers, those guys could potentially make an impact. But I see this as more of a low-scoring game, Mike. Mm-hmm. This is not going to be the game that we spoke about, Buffalo and Detroit, where it was going to be a high-scoring game. I don't think so. No. I'm going to go with, in this score, for Minnesota and New England, Minnesota 17, New England 14. Mike, your thoughts?
I'll up it. I'll up it just a tiny bit. I'll say 2017 Minnesota.
Okay, so New England does not cover, and with Minnesota, their opening line being 2.5 could potentially be not great for those that might pick New England. So that is something that we'll keep an eye out on. Ian did say also, Cousins in primetime, give DeLuca the points with New England. That's very good. That's very good. Yes, of course, because he knows, we all know that Kirk Cousins simply cannot get it done in primetime. But I do believe, though, that he'll have some help tomorrow. There's no doubt. I think exactly what you said, Mike, with the offense of New England. It's beyond porous. There's a lot of problems, but the defense, though, is what will keep this New England team alive. That's why I said 17-14, because it's very simple. That both defenses will be a game of defense. There's no doubt, with sprinkled offense in there for both of these organizations. Mike, let's continue on here. Still with football, we're about an hour in, but we still got a long ways to go. Where does Odell Beckham Jr. go? This is a big thing, because we continuously hear that there's a lot of rumors going around that, the big thing is could he potentially be going to Dallas or the Giants? And those are the two front runners. And oddly enough, those two are playing tomorrow. So we've brought this up multiple times off camera. We've brought this up in our group chain. There's going to be a lot of eyes on tomorrow's game. Now, does the illness bug take that into account of where he goes? Whoever the winner may be, does he go there because he wants to go back to the playoffs? I still think the Giants are the front runners here.
Yeah, I think there's a connection to him being, home. Was there the question of did he ever really want to go away? From the Giants, even if he had problems with Eli and all that sort of stuff, and rehashing all that from way back when, that seems like eons ago. But I personally, I'll say something unpopular, but I've been going back and forth about it and whatnot. Is it really prudent for the Giants to sign him? Yes, the wide receiver room is bad. they're down to practice squad guys. They've had a ton of injuries, grab people off the waiver wire to piece things together. For the early part of the season, Richie James was the leader in touchdowns. Marcus Johnson's been getting a bunch of the receptions. Now Wan'Dale Robinson, just when he was starting to ascend, he goes down this week. Darius Slayton might be questionable, and he's really your number one right now. When he started out the season, they documented it well last game. He took a pay cut, whatnot. He was basically the fourth wide receiver at the start of the year on the depth chart. As much as you take in all of that, you really want to sign a guy with even more injury baggage. No one's saying injuries are Odell's fault or anything like that, but he's gotten into plenty of injury trouble ever since he's left New York and missed quite a bit of games. With all the injury struggles the Giants are already having, do I really want to add another injury-prone kind of player? I don't know. It's a tough call to make. There's a lot. It's high risk in that sort of sense, but high reward in that. We know Odell can perform here. He was absolutely, he made his name here in New York. He was absolutely fantastic. Rose to be one of the better wide receivers in the game. Had the great run with Los Angeles that sort of revitalized his career a little bit. To end off last year and win the Super Bowl before he got injured. But he can perform, and there's a potential for a high reward. But I don't know. Those injuries really concern me. I think for Dallas, what they got going for him is, he lives down there, I think, or I think he has property down there or something like that. So maybe you're right. The winner of this game could predicate a lot on that decision.
Yeah, I just think especially too when you look at the Giants wide receiver room, it's a legitimate disaster. Dallas, obviously, there's a lot more upside right now just because they have the names, they have whatever the case may be, and he could fit right in there, and he potentially doesn't have to be the guy. Also, that's the thing. CeeDee Lamb is the guy there, but Odell Beckham would kind of go into the role in Dallas similar to the way he was last season in LA. He was that number 2 guy that, it was Cooper Kupp, obviously, and then he came right in and, kind of flew under the radar until he blew out his ACL in the Super Bowl and revitalized his career to an extent. Yes, he got a ring. He was able to show out pretty well in Los Angeles for the most part. But that's the big thing I think here that a lot of people are not realizing also is that if he were to go to the Cowboys, he would be the number 2. And some people might not agree with me there because you have CeeDee Lamb and then you would have Odell Beckham and then you'd have Gallup in the slot, Noah Brown on the outside still. But you would be able to have a little bit more semblance there in rotation and everything along those lines and another weapon for Dak Prescott. There would be a little bit more, in my opinion, tug and pull in terms of maybe a little bit more money you'd have to throw at Odell Beckham if you were the Giants because there's not a lot that you've got there. There's not a lot. And you brought it up, Mike. You said it too. Darius Slayton is technically your de facto number 1 right now, and Richie James is your de facto number 2 because of so many injuries. Keep in mind, too, long time ago, the Giants lost Sterling Shepard. Kenny Golladay is useless. Wan'Dale Robinson tore out his ACL last week. So your wide receiver room is depleted. If he goes in there, a lot of teams will look at him as the number 1. He'll probably be taking 1 wide receiver reps and, whatever alongside Darius Slayton. But what happens on that depth chart? I don't know. I still believe, though, that I'm with you that he does maybe want to come back here. The logical explanation or the logical choice, if he wants to be that number 2 and fly low, which we all know that Odell Beckham has always wanted to be the guy. We all know that. He's wanted to be the guy, which is the reason why I say that the Giants will still be the front runner. And whoever wins tomorrow, if the Giants were to come out and overcome this 10-point spread that Las Vegas has on them, they're the underdogs, then that's great. But again, 8-3, it doesn't cost you much at that point. I wouldn't even call it high risk. I would call that low risk because you're not paying the man that much money. You've got $3.5 million on the cap, and still $3.5 million to play with. And the problem that I have would be not really a problem. It would be a high reward situation, low risk, because as our good friend Ian Schraier says to us all the time, the Giants are playing with house money.
Mm-hmm.
And we typically don't do this. We've done this with Rob DeLuca plenty of times, but that's not really our forte, the sports betting department. What was the over-under on the Giants' win-loss record this year? I think it was 5.5.
Yeah.
5.5, and now they already superseded that. They've got 7. They could be going to 8 tomorrow. They're playing with house money, and this is a year where they have $56 million in dead money. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money that they've got on the dead cap. I'm sorry, 47 million on the dead. The Eagles have 56. That's my fault. So 47 million on the dead cap, and they're performing like this. Why not? Take the risk. Take the risk. Throw them a bone at $1 million with a ton of signing bonuses and a ton of incentives.
Yeah.
Prove it. It makes him play better. Maybe. But again, that's the whole thing, though, is that does he want to be that number one? Because he would be in the Giants. That's the issue. So I guess your final thought then, Mike, where does he go? Does he go to the Giants? Does he go to the Cowboys? What do you think? I have him going to the Giants.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to read. I biasy aside, I will say the Giants. I think they given to the nostalgia. I think they realized, hey, we got a shot to make the playoffs here. Let's take the risk. Plant him in there. We need some help on the wide receiver room at the very least to stay competitive. If not, try and steal a couple of games and get into the playoffs. And the nostalgia again there with having Odell back and to lead this upstart team. Back to the playoffs in a year where that was the last thing you expected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So we'll keep moving on here, and we'll finish off our football segment, of course, with our picks. So we've got some good ones here, and Mike, of course, had to ruin the Primetime Rundown's hopes and dreams of staying at 5 games beyond Essential Wrestling Podcast crew. So let us show you the predictions from Week 11. So you had primarily Baltimore. You had primarily New England there too. Or not primarily, but you had primarily Baltimore. And then you had a couple of guys picking New England. Then a couple of guys picking Washington. Myself and Ian picked Washington. Mike and DeLuca picked New England. And the other guys, Baltimore. But then you had Evan, who picked Las Vegas, which is wild. And Casey fell into the trap of Minnesota.
His email was so hilarious. He was so confident that we shared. My God, 40-3.
He was very, very, very confident about Minnesota. So let's look at the standings here. Now, 37-29, Essential Wrestling Podcast is down by 4 games. Primetime Rundown, 41-25. So LP, Larry Protakowitz is back, is absolutely pretty much like at a 90-degree angle at this point. I'm 8-3 atop the Essential Wrestling Podcast. Casey and Tyler are 4-7. 4 games back, Tyler. 6 games back, Casey. Now, Mike Szabo got a loss last week, ladies and gentlemen. Now, why did he get a loss? He did get a win, though, right? So he got a win, but week 9, what did he do? He picked New England. Oh, that's a big, 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 big. No, you can't do that. It's a losing situation.
This is what
And
happens when I don't make when I make picks the second before I go to sleep on Saturday night and send it to you, and without having the list next to me. And maybe it was just super. I think Patriot, like I said on Twitter, I think Patriots fans will be happy. I keep on making these invalid picks. We'll just go ahead. I'm 2-0 with the Patriots this year, so keep on picking them. I'll be good luck.
that
So
is
you
very
know,
true.
it was also funny. I'm going through, all the games and which one should I pick. My second choice, I didn't even realize I had already picked Minnesota too. So my second choice would have been a double pick also. So I was a mess this week.
It was a loss either way for Mike Szabo. Unbelievable. So Mike is now 5 games back of LP, 4 games back of DeLuca, who's 9-2. So LP looks to be taking and running away with the individual trophy for this year. The team trophy right now is in favor of Primetime Rundown at this point in time. But again, a 4-game difference with Primetime Rundown ahead of the Essential Wrestling Podcast crew. So with that being said, let us get to our picks. Mike Szabo, let's get your pick here for this one. What do we got? And keep in mind, too, folks, Thanksgiving games this week are eligible to be picked for the guys. So, Mike, what do you got?
So I would be going with the Miami Dolphins over the Houston Texans this week.
Yeah, and I think the old formula and the old trick, right, is always go with the team that's always going to be the number 1 overall pick in the draft, right? Towards the end of the season, it's always like, all right, well, we know that this team is going to either be tanking or they're just simply not going to win. And that's who we're taking. So, but I decided to actually go outside the box here this week. And I know, as Mike said, the clear and obvious choice is Miami. But I said, you know what? I'm going to hold off on that. And I'm going to go outside the box and I'm going to say, okay, this is a team that is on the upswing. They are another team playing with house money. And Geno Smith is absolutely out of his mind right now with Tyler Lockett, with Noah Fant. And that defense, too, and also DK Metcalf, too. And also that defense, too, is running wild, too. Give me the Seattle Seahawks inside Lumen Field, taking on Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders have no shot against Seattle. Bold prediction, but Seattle is going to take this one this week. That is our pick. So Miami and Seattle. Got it. All right. So we're about an hour and 20 down here on the Primetime Rundown, episode 102. Cannot thank everyone enough for making us a part of your Thanksgiving Eve tonight. Alongside Mike Szabo, Joey Jarzynka on hand with you. The Primetime Rundown is presented to you by Black Cats NYC. Once again, be sure to download their newest hit single, Nothing's Gonna Stop Us. You can download that on Spotify and Apple Music as well. And you can also hear it on iHeartRadio. Let's move over to hockey. So, Mike, there's a lot to talk about in the sport of hockey. We got a chance to talk about a little bit of that last month about some surprises that we had. And I had Montreal, you had Buffalo. And all of a sudden now in that month span, Mike, Buffalo has been on an 8-game losing streak. But staying close to home, the Devils have been absolutely lighting it up. But we're going to start with the Rangers, though, because the Rangers, they've got their own set of problems. And I hate to be that guy, but I kind of called it when I always say depth helps. And when teams don't have depth, you could have some issues. But the Rangers have quietly gotten a couple of points back. They're 10-6-4 with 24 points. They had a massive win last night in LA, 5-3. And now they've got Anaheim tonight, who, mind you, have a grand total of 5 wins, all in overtime. Not a single regulation win yet this season. And we are a month and a half into the season. What a disaster. Rangers legends Ryan Strome and Frank Vetrano simply cannot turn the ship around over there in Disneyland. But first, the Rangers. What do you see here, Mike? Talk to us about your grievances and talk to us about what have you done here with the head coach? What is this?
I don't know. The holidays are coming up, Joey. I've been eating too much pie. I haven't been watching enough film. I expected the God, Mr. Inevitable, should be doing a lot better, although he did score 2 goals last night in the
He
third
did.
period. So, he maybe he's finally starting to come around, and I can go back to eating pie tomorrow and not having to worry about the film session. But with the Rangers, it's not even been about depth. It's just the scoring hasn't been there. A lot of guys just haven't been producing. Panarin's on quite a cold streak. He had a pretty good second period or whatnot, but he's on quite the scoring drought. You'd love to see him start getting more on the scoring sheet. The thing is, really, it's been. Compare last year to this year. Their 5-on-5 scoring is kind of the same. It's not great. It's a struggle at times. They're relying on Igor to make big stops and have some big performances to keep them in games or win them games late on. And then you couple that this year with the power play. I mean, the power play is fine, but it's not as extremely great and efficient as it was last year. That was really bailing them out. So you put that all together, and it's really made it a frustrating struggle sometimes for the Rangers over the course of the season. But then, as I was kind of saying this morning, you look at the standings, man, it could be a lot worse the way we're talking about the Rangers. It could be a lot worse. 10-6-4 after 20, tied for third, albeit a game in hand for Carolina, but tied for third. Well, second or whatever the way, second on the Metropolitan. After 20, so all on 24 points. So it could be a lot worse, given the way they've played at times. But they've had, like you said, they've had a pretty solid road trip so far. You would have liked to see them get the win in Seattle there, but then they lost in overtime. If you're gonna lose in overtime is what I say.
Get a point.
So, yeah. That was a huge win against a solid Kings team last night. It's been pretty good so far this year. So that was a big time win, a massive second period in order to take the lead and then eventually close it out in the third. But yeah, they've been getting a little bit better. The West Coast trip has been better, but guys just need to start stepping up and performing. You like Panarin to get back on the score sheet more. The 5-on-5 needs to pick it up a little bit. It's kind of been a struggle, a lot of their performances and whatnot, but good signs maybe ahead. So we'll see. I think Anaheim, you would say the Anaheim game tonight should be a win given how the Ducks have played, but sometimes us more negative people will be like, oh yeah, knowing all of that, and you give the game preview. Oh yeah, of course, this is going to be Anaheim's first regulation win tonight, right? Revenge goals from Ryan Strome and Frank Vetrano. They had a couple weeks ago in the Garden,
assisted by Kevin Shattenkirk too.
Yeah, so even worse. So you probably get that, and watch you'll have the with the Yaroslav Halak in goal as well. You get the first regulation win of the year for the Ducks. So that's being more cynical. But you think if they do win tonight, you think, hey, solid road trip. You think is maybe they're starting to come out of this. This slide a little bit, this whatever you want to label it, the adjective, kind of weird play, and then sets up an interesting game against Edmonton on the weekend. So kind of been ugly, kind of been a heave-ho struggle, but solid road trip so far for the Rangers.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you bring that up because now it's very difficult with the Rangers to kind of gauge their direction. And the reason why is because not only did they trade away They trade away Ryan Reeves today for a 2025 fifth round draft pick to Minnesota. Now, Minnesota is in a precarious position because of their cap hit issues, and they have $14 million on the dead cap because of the buyouts from Zach Parise and Ryan Suter from a couple of years ago. But be that as it may, the Wild took on that contract, $1.75 million, which, mind you, if I'm not mistaken, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan Reeves was scratched the previous 5 games. So there were some question marks already, and you heard some rumblings that he wanted out, that he wanted some quote unquote fresh start, which was something big too. But again, I bring up the fact that Vitaly Kravtsov has been a legitimate disaster to start this season. And again, there are things that you can't control, right? Things you can't control, right? There was one time when he was out with a stomach virus, which unfortunately you cannot control. But the next time also too is that he was, if I'm not mistaken, Mike, and correct me if I'm wrong, when I heard this, I nearly spit out my food, or my breakfast. He was at the dentist all day. He missed a game because he was at the dentist, because there was dental stuff with his teeth going on. He missed practice. He missed the game that night. And I believe he had missed, I think it was 3 games in a row because of the stomach virus and then because of the dentist issue. He has been very, I don't want to call it soft. He has not been reliable is the question, is I think the better way to put it.
Well, I think the when he's played also, I think he's struggled really being catching up and managing the physicality of the NHL. You saw the first game of the year against the Tampa Bay Lightning. He suffered that big hit, and he was out for I think it was 2 or 3 games after that or whatnot. So I think he puts him. I think. Gallant was famous, in that after that initial game with Kravtsov and whatnot, that, sometimes he plays himself into bad situations on the boards to get some big hits and whatnot, that, I think he said something to that effect of having to play a little bit, more, more intelligently and whatnot. But I think physicality and trying to manage the physicality of the NHL has been an issue for him also. And this was kind of like, last year before all the, issues with the Rangers brass and whatnot. And, he hightailed it, out of there and was away from the Rangers for a year. We kind of thought he was going to be the breakout guy then. That didn't happen. Now he sort of kind of said that to a certain extent this year. It's going to benefit him being on a line with Panarin. Either because of injury, he hasn't really been able to generate that chemistry, or just not really playing that well. And, the Rangers with their cap situation could really use a guy like him, on cheap money, being able to play well and start breaking out, and just hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, and again, too, Jimmy Vesey, he's another one right now. He's playing on that top line with Kreider and Zibanejad, too. And again, the kid line had to go back together. Lafreniere, Hedl, and Capo Caco. That third line, it's back now, and you kind of hope that there's some sort of rejuvenation there for the Rangers to try and get something going, because again, the Rangers addressed their center issue this offseason with Vinny Trocheck, but they kind of forgot their right wing number 1 issue. When they had Frank Vetrano in there last year, they simply could not get the money aspect together. Now they also are trying to get under the cap. They're already under the cap. They had initially put in, for those that, remember from a while back, about a month ago, they put Dryden Hunt on waivers. Colorado claimed him immediately. And now you're left with another player, I don't want to call it skilled player, but an experienced player that has NHL experience, where you might not have to look to Hartford and say, okay, hey, we're going to bring up a guy who's going to be making his NHL debut. This is our 13th forward. It kind of has you thinking and wondering, okay, well, we need to, ship off Ryan Reeves. We're going to have to make a trade, probably come the deadline. We're going to accrue that cap space. But just like what you and I were talking about off camera before, too, is that I've seen in a lot of Rangers fan groups about who they want. How can you potentially figure out that right wing one spot? Is Jimmy Vesey the answer? You're going to play with Kravtsov, Kakko. Who do you have on the other side? Because again, you're not going to replicate the season from Igor Shesterkin. You're not going to replicate the season from Chris Kreider. And when you look last year, two of those guys were pretty much like 70% of the reason why there were lots of wins. Yep. Now you need some reinforcements when the other guys that are not contributing, you need some help from them. You need some help when the guys that are there currently are not contributing with the guys that were contributing last year. They're not. You need some help, and you can't rely on those two in Kreider and Shesterkin forever. So you're going to need help. So I keep seeing flying around in this group, and I keep seeing Patrick Kane's name being thrown around in there. Now, Mike, for you as a Rangers fan, do you want him? But the thing is that even if you want him, does he address every single need for this team to potentially get to the Cup final? It's tough because, again, the defense is not as great either.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you'd want, I mean, the first thing off of the top of your head, yeah, everybody gets allured with Kane and whatnot and all, but you think this team is honestly going to look for a Justin Braun type of move and look for a veteran defenseman at the deadline as like their first thing to shore up that third pairing. Pretty much most of the way this season it's been Braden Schneider and Zach Jones, who Schneider in particular, who has, he showed out in the playoffs last year, whether that, was really helped by having an experienced hand like Braun guide him through it or whatnot. But, he showed that he's belonged, but, especially out of the two from him and Jones. But, all the time when you have really young defensemen like him and Jones, there's going to be peaks and valleys. There's going to be some bad moments, some bad games here and there, along with the really good ones. And, you really want to limit that as you get to the core part, the stretch of the season and into the playoffs. I won't be surprised if they go for a veteran defenseman. And I think dealing Reeves and accruing cap space and whatnot, I think they probably will have around $4 million to play with at the deadline. That's if you're talking about Kane, then that's all you're doing at the deadline. You would have to have Chicago retain 50%. You give up whatever you give up, and that just barely fits it in. Depending on who you give up, all the math, that sort of stuff would be talked about then. God forbid it would happen, but I mean, $4 million that just barely fits Kane into it. I think you'd still want a veteran defenseman as well. A lot also depend, do I want him? A lot depends on who you give up, what it's going to cost. He's going to be a rental, so maybe that brings it down. If you're Chicago, we talked about this off air. I think in Chicago's point of view, even if it is for a rental, this is for Patrick Kane. We'll see what his numbers are by then. But I'd be shocked if they wouldn't be pushing for a Kakko or Lafreniere, at least one of one of them in that deal. And if you don't, I think as a Chicago fan, maybe you feel slightly disappointed giving away a guy like Kane and not getting, one of the Rangers' two prized, up and coming young players. If you're a Rangers fan and you get Kane without having to trade Kakko and Lafreniere, I'm doing that deal all day. Yeah. And you slide him in right wing, top line. I think he could spur you on to try and get to that Cup final. Absolutely, but there are a lot of things in play in order to get there.
So let's keep moving forward here, and let's go to the Islanders side, because they all of a sudden have 24 points as well. And I think you, me, our entire group never thought that they would have 24 points at November 23rd. I can tell you I didn't. I did not have them getting 24 points till probably Christmas. They simply are one of the oldest teams in the league. Matthew Barzal has a brand new contract. He's playing similar to a Henrik Sedin type style of game where he's pass first, and he ranks second in the NHL with 20 assists, which is nice. He's got 2 goals. The team has a plus 11 goal differential. Defensemen are key. They've got Edmonton going right this second. This is a team that all of a sudden we'll see how long they can go. The thing to me, again, with this Islanders team, they do have a lot of experience. They do have a lot of playoff experience as well. And keep in mind too, again, this is not a knock on any Rangers fan. This could be big down the stretch too. If points were to come into play, tiebreakers come into play as well. And the Islanders have already beaten the Rangers twice.
Yep.
That's a big deal. And I know Mike brought it up too, because he said that, the Rangers, the Islanders, and the Hurricanes are all in a 3-way tie, with the Hurricanes leading the way because they have 1 game in hand with 24 points. But that could be a big deal down the stretch if that were to happen, where, again, I think there's so much more at stake for the Rangers than there are the Islanders, because they had no expectations coming in anyway from a lot of people. But from what we have gotten to see, though, is that this team still doesn't like to shoot. Granted, they are 11 plus 11 goals in differential. The defensemen are absolutely fantastic. And for those that have no idea, Noah Dobson is going to get a big payday once his bridge deal is done. Noah Dobson is an up-and-coming defenseman, similar to the way Devon Toews was a couple of years ago. And look where he is. He just hoisted the Stanley Cup alongside Cale Makar. He plays on that top defensive pair with Colorado. And for the Islanders, they're okay in this scenario or this situation, but they have skidded a little bit. Brand new head coach Lane Lambert trying to add some offensive attack in there, trying to keep that Trotz defensive scheme together. Make some adjustments, of course. But this is a squad that I believe could potentially play spoiler, and they already have against this Rangers team. And it's crazy because they have only 3 games between one another. I think that's right? Mike, I think it's 3 games between one another now. Divisional opponents now is 3 games.
I believe so, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So they took them down on Wednesday Night Hockey on TNT. And then they took them down at the Garden. Now they've got one more at the Garden, I think in less than a month. And then that's it.
Yeah.
And that's it. And those are 4 quality points that are now gone if you need them later on down the road.
Yep. December 22nd. December 22nd. Yep.
Yeah, and that's a big deal. Again, I won't really elaborate more on the Islanders because it's not really much to talk about. Because aside from Matthew Barzal, aside from Noah Dobson, aside from your Kyle Palmieri's, and who's, by the way, is out tonight, and Simon Holmstrom, first-round pick from a couple of years ago, had to take his place in the lineup. There's not much really to discuss with this team because they are flying under the radar, and yet they've won 12 out of the first 20 games. Wild stuff. I would never have thought that. But, Mike, who would have ever thought that the Devils would win 13 straight? And they're going for 14 tonight.
Yeah, I mean, they're just off to take Rob DeLuca's words. They are an absolute wagon right now. They've gotten off to such a great start to the year, and we always kind of thought they had the potential in terms of contending this year, but we always thought, we said in the preseason, this is a team, they got the potential, the Devils, to make it back to the playoffs and whatnot, but I don't think anybody expected this insane start to the year. We always thought in terms of contending for the Metropolitan Division itself, we thought they'll probably build to the playoffs this year, but they're probably a year away from divisional contention. The Devils probably read that and were just absolutely laughed because, I mean, they've been running roughshod over the NHL, 13 straight, like you mentioned. beating a lot of quality teams on the way. I mean, they've grown now out to relatively healthy lead. 8 points over Carolina, with both teams at 19 games. 32 when Islanders and Rangers are at 20 games with 24 there. So they already have a healthy lead for the division as well. I mean, you got to give props to the Devils, how strong they've started out. Maybe they're not so much a year away. It's been fantastic stuff from them. The offense has been rolling. The last couple games, Jesper Bratt has been really good. Just the addition of Palat we mentioned in the offseason, and that experience there. They've just had a really good run to start the year. Although the streak might be in a little bit of trouble. They got some work to do right now. They're down 2-0.
Yeah, they're down 2-0 against Toronto, looking for win number 14 straight. And also keep in mind, too, for those the Devils there, Jesper Bratt, Nico Hischier, and Jack Hughes all over 20 points this season. But I think the difference maker completely might just be John Marino on the back end. And we spoke with DeLuca. We spoke with so many, and seeing it all over social media, too. His plus minus, and I know a lot of folks don't take that into account, but a team high plus 12. That's a big deal, especially on the back end, too. He has been a dynamo that we have not really seen in Pittsburgh much when he was traded or before he was traded from Pittsburgh to New Jersey. He looks to be the part. And the best part, too, is that he's playing on that second D pairing. He looks the part. And there really is, and when you move also Damon Severson down to the third pair, it just shows the depth that this New Jersey team has, not only from, on the defensive side, but they're getting stuff from top to bottom too, on the forwards line. But this is a bold prediction here as we move into the biggest disappointment part of hockey before we move into FIFA. My bold prediction is that the Devils will acquire Timo Meier from the San Jose Sharks. Now, there's not a lot of teams that can pull off that trade, and there's not a lot of teams that can give him a respective qualifying offer. No, I'm sorry, a respective restricted free agent offer. I personally believe that Timo Meier will make his way to New Jersey, and he will be a big part of what this team is trying to build. And I think this year will be the year. By the deadline, Timo Meier will be in Newark. Mike, let's go to biggest disappointment before we go to FIFA. We will not go with Major League Baseball just because we got FIFA, we've got college basketball, and our sports updates, and then kudos. Biggest disappointment. What do you got?
Just tossing between a couple of things. I think biggest disappointment so far has kind of been Vancouver. I don't think anybody was expecting a whole ton and whatnot, but you had 92 points last year. You got JT Miller onto the big extension. You signed him up and lock him up long term. So kind of solidifying, in terms of on paper where you want the direction of this franchise to go. Solidify him as a building block long term and whatnot, and try and build off of that 90 season last year. And it has not gone well thus far.
Yeah, it's been really tough out there, and this is a storied franchise that has been trying to keep everything in place. At some point, you're going to have to tear it down. And how do you tear it down also when you just signed? And I think this is more on the lines of the ownership and Jimmy Rutherford pretty much getting everything from the top. They're reluctant to tear it down, and they're living in a fantasy world that they don't want to accept the reality that they have to tear it down completely. And we saw signs of that last year when they traded for Oliver Ekman-Larsson from Arizona, and that blew up in their face completely. And also keep in mind, too, we also saw it, too, when Connor Garland simply could not get it done there as well. He was a part of that trade. They couldn't get it done there. Now, Bo Horvat looks to be on the way out. because they can't afford him, and he's going to probably get in the 8s or 9s. We'll have to wait and see where Bo Horvat goes because that's their team's captain. Yep. Where is he going to go? And I think he has like 14 goals already. So whoever wants him, because he's a rental, they will be paying a big price. So Vancouver's in flux right now, and they had so much expectation, as you said, Mike, and now they are in flux. They have really nothing to show for pretty much anything. Tough go for Vancouver. But my biggest disappointment here, Mike, and I'm sure a lot of hockey fans probably can agree. Washington, the Caps, they are 7-10-3 with 17 points, minus 12 goal differential. Now, Alex Ovechkin has 9 goals, 8 assists. Now, they have gone on a pair of 4-game losing streaks. Let's give you the first one. Let's break down the first one. So they lost 3-2 to Carolina. They lost 3-2 to Vegas. They lost 3-1 to Detroit. And they lost 3-2 to Arizona. Not horrendous losses, except the Arizona one. But Arizona has been showing that they're also playing with house money. So they're trying to, tell everyone that they can compete with the rest, even though that pretty much, Division III gyms look better than ASU's campus for an NHL team. And then the second losing streak that they're currently on started with a 6-3 loss to Tampa, a 5-2 loss to Florida, a 5-2 loss to St. Louis, which is a disaster, and most recently, a 4-0 shutout loss to Colorado. They don't have Nick Backstrom. They don't have Tom Wilson. They just got back TJ Oshie. And they lost Connor Brown, one of their acquisitions from Ottawa, in a buyout deal. Ottawa bought out Connor Brown. So he looked to be the part in Washington until he got hurt. Not the case. This team's window has been rapidly closing since they won the Stanley Cup and they lost Barry Trotz as their head coach because they simply did not want to pay for his services. You may have no choice but to begin a sell-off come this trade deadline because you only have a grand total of one. One defenseman signed beyond 2023. And that's John Carlson. Johnny can't do it all. You're going to need some help. And they don't have much. They have a very depleted farm, a very depleted AHL team. They simply need to figure it out now, or they have no choice but to tear it all down. And this is very close. Very close to doing so. Now, granted, there's so many issues with Backstrom and Wilson and Connor Brown. But you need, again, we brought up the next man up mentality in our football segment. We brought it up now in our hockey segment. They need some help, and they're simply not getting it. My other biggest disappointment, I'm not going to go into it, I'm just going to say the team, Calgary. I was so high on Calgary, and they 9-7-2, 20 points, minus 2 goal differential. Jonathan Huberdeau has not been the player that they thought he would be, but again, time will tell. He's there for another 8 years. They've got a ton of good things going for them. So, Mike, let's keep moving forward here. We do have a few more minutes to talk about FIFA, and we will skip the St. John's stuff because, great, they won. Big whoop. They're 6-0. We'll talk about their instant. We'll have an instant reaction for them sooner rather than later. So, FIFA, a lot of good things going on there. USA, they drew against Wales, 1-1, which I think we were all watching that match, and it looked as if that probably should have been a 1-0, a 1-0 victory, but not the case. So where do you see USA go with this?
He put a lot more pressure on yourself going into the England game on Friday. It's a frustrating result. Everybody can say, well, at least you didn't lose given how the second half was going and all that sort of stuff, because that would have been an absolute nightmare situation. But it's really frustrating given how much they dominated the first half. They really took out Gareth Bale in that Wales attack for most of the game, including especially in that first and really for the first 60 minutes or so. They completely dominated the first half. Probably should have had another goal going into the half. You finish off another chance here or there. But granted, give credit to Wales making some adjustments and whatnot. But for the U.S., you cannot have a absolute day and night kind of performance like that between two halves where they're dominating so much in the first and they absolutely wilted in the second. Now I have issues with Greg Berhalter and his substitutions, his strategy, his tactics and whatnot. But I mean, some blame also has to go to the personnel on the field, where the midfield for the U.S. just disappeared in terms of being able to break out on the counterattack. Fine, you absorbed some defensive pressure. Wales made some adjustments. They grew into the game. Fine, but there were plenty of chances for the U.S. to really burn Wales on the counterattack in that second half and solidify the results for them, and they missed it. Christian Pulisic, the talisman or whatnot, sure, he's not to blame for the tie, but I mean, you were watching that game in the second half. There were some big potential counterattacks that he missed there. Yep. He missed the pass. He missed the pass. He missed the assignment there. A bunch of the midfield, just wilted in terms of their service into the box. The crosses throughout the second half were terrible. A terrible service to go in. And then you get to the substitute. Before I get into the substitutions, then you had. Very late on, you had Walker Zimmerman make a third grade error where, I mean, that's like one of the first things they teach you. Like, seriously, don't slide in the penalty box. Like, it's literally a third grade thing they tell you not to do. Gareth Bale, who you had been keeping quiet all game, his back is to the goal. Just keep him at bay there. He's not going anywhere. His back's to goal. You have him covered. There's no reason why you got to go flailing in, right. Scissor kick, slide tackle, and whatnot, and give up an absolutely stupid penalty. Everybody in the stadium, everybody in the world watching knew that was an easy penalty. And it's such a shame because, Walker Zimmerman's been, such a rock at center back for the last year and a half or so for the U.S. men's national team and, just had a really, really bad moment there. But then, what's kind of ridiculous also is Greg Berhalter's response to it all. Terrible substitutions where Gio Reyna, another exciting prospect for this team, the game was crying out for him and his speed late on there to help break the game open, try and generate some more counterattacks again to get the lead back or solidify it. And instead he puts on Jordan Morris, just not. It's always just, one step forward, two steps back with Greg Berhalter. It always seems that way. His substitutions in the game were absolutely horrible. Gio Reyna, they said he was completely fit. A lot of the quotes coming out from the press conference afterward, and today there were other, a couple of quotes. He was fit for that game. He could have came in, and it's just absolutely egregious that he didn't step onto the field. And, talking about wanting him to play in the England game. You cannot look ahead in the World Cup. You simply cannot do that. The margin of error is too thin. So really disappointing. They put a lot of pressure on themselves now going into the game on Friday against England where they got to get some sort of result. You got to grab a tie. You lose to England, which could very well be possible with the extremely loaded attack they have. They're in a really tight position going into the final group game against Iran.
Yeah, I was going to say now, your thoughts on that England game on Friday, because that is something that is obviously a spectacle here in this country. Every time the men's national team gets going, 2 p.m. on Fox on Friday, it's the last game of the day for over in Qatar. So it's going to be a fun one. I'm pumped to see it, but what do you think happens with these guys?
Yeah, I think it was surprising. I thought Iran was going to put up a little bit more of a fight. They've had a really good last couple months in terms of their qualifying, their friendlies and whatnot. had a pretty solid attack, but England's midfield and their attack just absolutely overpowered them. I won't be surprised if the U.S. wind up losing this one like 2-3 nothing. Uh,
Wow.
I won't be. It's either going to be that or like a 1-0 grinded out game. There's no in between with this team. But you look at the attack; they have a loaded attack, and there were some guys who didn't even play. Phil Foden, the star at Manchester City, didn't play a heavy amount of minutes. My guy, Marcus Rashford at Manchester United, came on and scored with like 3 touches in the game. So they have such a loaded attack. It's going to be interesting how, the U.S. try and stop them, because it's not even your starting 11. They have some real good contributors that can come off the bench. But I won't be surprised that it's a 2-0 result, especially if the U.S. play the way that they did in the second half.
Well, we'll see what happens. Tottenham's Harry Kane leads the way for England, so that will be it'll be a fun battle on Friday, 2 p.m. But we did see, though, Argentina, they fell to Saudi Arabia, which is a big deal, especially Saudi Arabia about 2 hours away from Qatar. Nice gift there for some of the, the home crowd, if you will. Completely unexpected. Lionel Messi, we expect his last World Cup. So, or we might think his last World Cup, but you never know. The man's ageless. But this is a team that I did not expect to lose to Saudi. I don't think anyone did.
No, definitely, and they were up in the game to start off. They had the early penalty. They were up 1-0 for for pretty much most of the first half, going into the second, and they just fell apart. I mean, you got to give credit to Saudi Arabia. They had a good strategy. They had a good tactical setup. Hervé Renard has quietly been, a real strong name in African coaching around the international soccer world. Has led to some pretty interesting upsets. He brought Zambia to the 2015, African Cup win and whatnot. So he's quietly built a resume as like, this king of, bringing the underdogs forward, and really been building this Saudi Arabia program. And I think they sort of mentioned it in the broadcast, how much stock was put into this World Cup for Saudi Arabia. Pretty much their entire squad plays in their domestic league. So they basically said they were stopping the domestic league pretty much by Halloween. They stopped all domestic play and whatnot, whereas everywhere else in the world was pretty much going up until last weekend. And they played 6 friendlies in the last month, to get ready for this. So they were rested in terms of not playing as many games. They were match sharp. They developed that chemistry and whatnot, and they had executed a great game plan. And what a winning goal! Right there. I think it was the 60th something minute or whatever.
Yeah.
Fantastic goal into the top corner, and Argentina were just stunned. They really didn't know what to do after that. They couldn't really deal with the high line of Saudi Arabia and really what to do. They had no adjustments, no answer for a lot of the strategies. So kudos to them. I mean, that is the biggest, that has to be the biggest upset in World Cup history. And I mean, congrats to them. That's something that you don't see often, and just a fantastic result.
Is that your kudos there, Mike? Is that your?
Pretty much.
I was gonna say, is that your indirect kudos there? Very nice. Well, yeah, there's a lot going on too. Again, FIFA, it's tons of fun. Every 4 years this goes on, and I'm pumped for Friday, I can tell you. And as Mike knows, as everyone else knows out there that know me, I'm not really the big soccer guy that Mike is. But this is, I'm getting into it. This is a ton of fun, and it's a fun World Cup that we are seeing here already. It's unfortunate that the first match goes off at 4 a.m., but we're seeing the later matches, so it's fun. There's no doubt.
If you like my brother, he was even when he got up. I'll give him props. He was the one. He got up right away for 5 a.m. to watch that Argentina Saudi. I couldn't bring it. I set the alarm. I tried. I set the alarm, and then I'm just like, no.
Yeah, no. I mean,
I'll
that's
catch
why.
the second half. I'll
Yeah.
manage that. I caught the second half. I caught, most of the second half there. I'm like, I could manage that. But not, no, 4:30, no. We're
Yeah,
not doing
no.
that.
For one,
That
I love my sleep, and there is DVR too. That's another thing. There is DVR. So that is crucial. Mike, let's conclude our show with sports updates. So we're going to move that St. John's one into sports updates. So St. John's, they earned their second MTE in the last 4 years with a win over Temple and Cuse in the Vivid Seats Empire Classic it was Temple, Syracuse, Richmond, and last team I'm thinking of, Temple. Oh, St. John's. Temple, Richmond, Syracuse, and Richmond. So those 4 teams went head to head, and St. John's took down Syracuse for the title last night in Brooklyn. So that was pretty cool stuff to see. Other sports updates too. We got a chance to hear about it on Monday. Cristiano Ronaldo and Manchester United, upon quote unquote mutual agreement, they part ways effective immediately. That was a big deal. The Rams waived running back Darrell Henderson after 4 touches on Sunday. He was picked up by the Jacksonville Jaguars today. That's another big deal. Broncos running back Melvin Gordon was released this week, so we'll see who will be taking first team snaps at running back for the Broncos. Rams QB Bryce Perkins taking first team reps ahead of the big showdown against Kansas City on Sunday. John Wolford and Matthew Stafford are both hurt, so that is definitely another developing story. And also the Houston Texans, they benched Davis Mills and will start Kyle Allen on Sunday against the Dolphins. So there's no wonder why Mike Szabo picked the Dolphins, because now you're going up against Kyle Allen. But you never know. Kyle Allen could have done well. He did well with Washington a couple of years back. Remember that?
Mm-hmm. You just want me to get nervous about my pick now.
Intimidation factor, right? We'll see. Oh, man. It's unbelievable. But because Mike did his kudos, I will now do my kudos. Binghamton guard and St. John's legend, John McGriff. He shot the game winner for Binghamton this afternoon, and what a game winner it was. Mike, my question to you is why can't St. John's get guys like that? I mean, that's a Jaden Daly thing, but I mean, listen, this is a kid that lost his playing time, simply couldn't do it. He simply didn't get playing time. As a freshman, redshirt freshman, and now he's seeing some good stuff in the America East. So kudos to John McGriff, who used to be a St. John's men's basketball player a couple of years ago. Let us conclude our show with a few notes. For starters, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to just say, cannot thank you all enough for being a part of the Eastern Observer family and for watching us all year long. We would not have made it 102 episodes without each and every one of you tuning in week by week. Now, our big announcement here that Mike and I have decided to do is that we will be scrubbing our Friday night slot for the time being. Now, the reason why is because Mike and myself, we are freelance play-by-play broadcasters, and we have a lot going on at this time between winter sports, multiple schools. Mike is still a baby, so he's still in elementary school. So he's got some paper airplanes to build and to fly across the second grade classroom. So he's got a lot going on there. But Friday nights at 7 p.m. will not be the official time any longer. For now, it will be to be determined, and we will tell you all to please follow us on social media at Observe Eastern on Twitter and also on Instagram, which we will be getting our Instagram up to speed in a few short weeks. We have a few folks running that right now. So we're working on that as well. Please follow us at Eastern Observer on Instagram. Excuse me, I was going to say Instant Reaction. But for those that also want to make sure that that you're up to date on the Primetime Rundown, please be sure to subscribe to us. The following platforms: Apple Music, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Odyssey, Google Play. store. And if you would like to see our beautiful faces week by week, please search the Eastern Observer on YouTube. Also, the same thing goes with our guys from the Essential Wrestling Podcast. Al Carl, John DeConnie, John Smith, Gary Mehefe bring you the latest every single week in the world of wrestling. Please be sure to check them out every single Tuesday night right here on the Eastern Observer. And for those that would like to subscribe to them, you could do on the exact same platforms as the other. Be sure to check them out for episode number 128, Tuesday, November 29th at 5 p.m., presented to you by ProWrestlingPick'em.com on right here, the Eastern Observer. One final time, ladies and gentlemen, both myself and Mike Szabo would like to say and extend a happy Thanksgiving to every single one of you watching here tonight. For Mike, for myself, for our entire group, Blackjack Media Group and the Eastern Observer, I'm Joey Jarzynka saying so long, and we will see you all at a to-be-determined date down the road.